In the final days of his extraordinary life, Carl Jung shared a profound revelation that would forever change how we understand our spiritual purpose. What you do not bring to consciousness comes to you as fate. These weren't just the words of a dying man, but the culmination of a lifetime dedicated to exploring the depths of the human psyche. This insight, perhaps more than any other, holds the key to understanding why some people seem destined to awaken while others remain trapped in unconscious patterns throughout their lives. Where are you watching this video from today? Share in the comments below. The place you're in right now carries a unique energy that influences how this message will resonate with your soul. Have you ever felt that there's something greater trying to communicate with you through your dreams and synchronicities? Those moments when coincidences seem too meaningful to be random. That empty feeling in your chest that no material possession can fill. Jung discovered that this sensation of emptiness and disconnection isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's actually your soul's call to awakening. In our modern world, we're constantly distracted, moving from one external achievement to another, rarely taking the time to listen to the whispers of our unconscious mind. Yet these whispers contain the most profound guidance we could ever receive. Think about it for a moment. When was the last time you experienced a meaningful coincidence that stopped you in your tracks? Perhaps you were thinking about someone and they called you seconds later. Or maybe you kept seeing the same number pattern everywhere you looked. Or perhaps you had a dream that later manifested in your waking life. These aren't random events. They're what Jung called synchronicities, and they represent moments when the veil between your conscious mind and the deeper reality becomes thin. What was your last powerful synchronicity? Share it in the comments. Together, we'll weave a tapestry of collective experiences that reveals the hidden patterns connecting us all. The truth that Jung revealed before his passing is that we live in two worlds simultaneously. There's the outer world that everyone can see, our jobs, relationships, possessions, and then there's an inner world that's equally real, yet invisible to most. This inner realm isn't just personal. It connects to what Jung called the collective unconscious, a vast reservoir of wisdom, symbols, and energies that all humans share. The chosen ones, as Jung discovered, are those who learn to navigate both worlds with awareness and intention, rather than being unconsciously driven by forces they don't understand. But why did Jung believe that only a select few would truly grasp this knowledge? It wasn't because he believed in some form of spiritual elitism. Rather, he recognized that awakening to these deeper dimensions requires something that many people aren't willing to give: the courage to face oneself completely, including the darkest and most challenging aspects of your personality. This is where we encounter the first of Jung's most profound teachings that he emphasized near the end of his life: the encounter with the shadow. The meeting with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's own shadow. Jung wrote, "Your shadow contains everything you've rejected, denied, or repressed about yourself. It's the parts of you that you've deemed unacceptable, your anger, jealousy, selfishness, or weakness. These disowned aspects don't disappear just because you ignore them. Instead, they operate autonomously in your life, creating patterns of self-sabotage and projecting themselves onto others. Have you ever noticed how certain people trigger an almost irrational irritation in you? The colleague whose every word seems to grate on your nerves? The family member whose habits drive you to distraction? Jung would tell you that these strong reactions are actually mirrors. These people are reflecting back to you the very aspects of yourself that you've banished to your shadow. When you react strongly to someone's behavior, ask yourself, what disowned part of me am I seeing in this person? This simple question can transform your most challenging relationships into opportunities for profound self-discovery. Take a moment right now to identify someone who deeply irritates you. What quality in them triggers you the most? Now consider, how might this quality exist within you? Perhaps in a different form. Share your insight in the comments. This act of bringing awareness to your shadow is the first step toward integration and freedom from unconscious patterns. The reward for this courage is immense. When you reclaim these disowned parts of yourself, you experience a sense of wholeness and liberation. The energy that was once consumed by keeping these aspects repressed becomes available to you as creative power. Your relationships improve, because you no longer unconsciously project your shadow onto others. Most importantly, you stop manifesting your unacknowledged fears and desires as external fate. Instead, you become the conscious creator of your life experience. Jung's second crucial teaching involves recognizing synchronicities as spiritual guideposts. Synchronicity, he explained, is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. These meaningful coincidences aren't random. They're moments when your inner psychological state aligns with external events, revealing the interconnected nature of all things. They're like signposts from the universe, guiding you toward your authentic path. Have you noticed certain patterns or symbols appearing repeatedly in your life? Perhaps you keep encountering the same type of person, or facing similar challenges, or seeing certain numbers or animals at significant moments. These aren't accidents. They're the language of your unconscious speaking to you through the material world. Jung discovered that when we pay attention to these patterns, we begin to recognize that there's an invisible hand guiding our journey. In the next 24 hours, I challenge you to become consciously aware of the synchronicities appearing in your life. Notice the patterns, the recurring symbols, the meaningful coincidences that seem to speak directly to your current situation. What messages are trying to reach you? Come back and share what you discover. You might be surprised how many others are experiencing similar patterns. When you begin to recognize synchronicities as meaningful communications rather than random events, you develop what Jung called symbolic sight. This is the ability to perceive the deeper significance behind ordinary experiences. A chance encounter becomes a destined meeting. A seemingly random event reveals itself as the perfect next step on your path. This shift in perception connects you to the flow of divine intelligence that's constantly guiding you toward wholeness. The benefit of developing this awareness extends far beyond the intellectual satisfaction of seeing patterns. It creates a profound sense of being held in a meaningful universe rather than a chaotic one. Anxiety diminishes as you recognize that you're not alone in your journey. There's an intelligent force supporting your evolution. Decision-making becomes more intuitive as you learn to read the signs and symbols appearing in your life. Most importantly, you begin to trust the unfolding of your life, even during challenging periods, because you recognize them as necessary chapters in your larger story. This brings us to Jung's third essential teaching, the collective unconscious, as a source of wisdom. In addition to our immediate consciousness, Jung wrote, there exists a second psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature which is identical in all individuals. This collective unconscious contains what Jung called archetypes, universal patterns and images that have appeared throughout human history in myths, dreams, and religious symbolism. By recognizing that you carry within you the accumulated wisdom of humanity, you gain access to guidance and insights far beyond your personal experience. Your dreams become portals to this collective wisdom, speaking to you through universal symbols like water, fire, trees, or journeys. Water often represents the unconscious mind and emotions. Fire typically symbolizes transformation and purification. Trees frequently appear as symbols of growth and connection between worlds. Journey dreams often reflect your spiritual path and life direction. What symbols appear repeatedly in your dreams or waking life? Pay attention to them. They're not random. They're archetypal patterns trying to communicate important information about your path. Share the symbol that appears most frequently for you in the comments below, and let's explore its meaning together. When you begin to recognize and work with these archetypal patterns, you tap into an intuitive knowing that transcends cultural conditioning. You recognize that certain experiences, the hero's journey, the encounter with the wise elder, the descent into darkness before rebirth, are universal human patterns that give meaning to your personal struggles. This connection to the collective unconscious provides a sense of belonging to something larger than yourself and access to wisdom that goes beyond what you could acquire in a single lifetime. Dreams are the primary language through which the collective unconscious communicates with us. Jung considered dreams not as random neural firings, but as meaningful messages from our deeper self. Dreams, he said, are the guiding words of the soul. By paying attention to your dreams, recording them, and contemplating their symbols, you open a direct channel to this universal wisdom. The chosen ones are those who learn to listen to these messages, rather than dismissing them as meaningless. Try this practice. Before sleeping tonight, place a notebook beside your bed and set the intention to remember your dreams. Upon waking, immediately write down whatever fragments you recall, even if they seem nonsensical. Over time, patterns will emerge, and you'll begin to recognize the unique symbolic language through which your unconscious communicates with you. This practice alone can transform your relationship with your deeper self. Jung's fourth critical teaching concerns the process of individuation, becoming who you truly are. The privilege of a lifetime, Jung wrote, is to become who you truly are. This journey of individuation isn't about becoming perfect or achieving some idealized state. It's about integrating all aspects of yourself, both light and shadow, into a coherent whole that expresses your unique essence. In our society, we're constantly pressured to conform to external expectations, to be more productive, more attractive, more successful, according to cultural standards. This pressure often leads us away from our authentic nature and creates inner conflict as we try to suppress aspects of ourselves that don't fit the prescribed mold. The result is a profound suffering, a sense of living someone else's life rather than your own. What aspect of your true essence have you been repressing to fit in or please others? Perhaps it's your creativity, your sensitivity, your need for solitude, or your unconventional views. Acknowledging this repressed quality is the first step toward reclaiming it and integrating it into your conscious identity. Which quality are you ready to reclaim? The mere act of recognizing it begins the process of liberation. The reward for this courageous journey toward authenticity is a sense of inner harmony and purpose. When you're no longer fighting against your true nature, the energy that was consumed by that internal conflict becomes available for creative expression. You discover your unique gifts and how they're meant to serve the world. Most importantly, you experience the profound satisfaction of living in alignment with your soul's intention rather than struggling against it. This journey toward wholeness isn't easy. It requires facing your fears, questioning your most basic assumptions about yourself, and often standing apart from the crowd. But as Jung discovered through his work with thousands of patients, the alternative is far more painful. A life of quiet desperation, haunted by the sense that you've never truly lived. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle. One of Jung's patients was a highly successful businessman who had achieved everything society told him to value: wealth, status, a beautiful family. Yet he was profoundly depressed and suffered from chronic insomnia and anxiety attacks. Through due analysis, Jung helped him recognize that he had completely suppressed his artistic nature since childhood. When his father had mocked his desire to become a musician, the man began to reconnect with music, at first just for a few minutes each day. As he honored this essential aspect of his nature, his symptoms began to diminish. He didn't abandon his business career, but he integrated his artistic sensitivity into his life, eventually becoming a patron of the arts and finding ways to bring creativity into his business practices. His life became not just successful but meaningful, not just productive but fulfilling. What part of yourself have you abandoned on your journey through life? It's never too late to reclaim it. The first step is simply acknowledging its existence and giving yourself permission to explore it without judgment or expectations. This is the beginning of the individuation process that Jung considered the primary purpose of human life. Jung discovered something remarkable about this journey toward wholeness. It isn't just personally healing, but collectively transformative. The world hangs on a thin thread, he said, and that thread is the human psyche. When individuals commit to their own psychological and spiritual development, they contribute to the evolution of the collective consciousness. This is perhaps the most profound reason why Jung's teachings matter so deeply in our current global situation. Consider how our world is facing unprecedented challenges: environmental degradation, polarized politics, technological disruption, and widespread mental health crises. Jung would suggest that these external problems reflect our collective inner state, our shadow writ large on the world stage. The solution, then, begins with individuals willing to face their own shadows, develop consciousness, and integrate their fragmented aspects into wholeness. This brings us to a critical insight from Jung's later years: the importance of active imagination as a bridge between conscious and unconscious realms. Active imagination is a method Jung developed for engaging directly with the contents of your unconscious mind through dialogue, visualization, or creative expression. Unlike passive fantasy, active imagination involves consciously engaging with the images and figures that emerge from your depths. Try this practice. Set aside 15 minutes in a quiet place where you won't be disturbed. Close your eyes and focus on a recent dream image, an emotional issue you're facing, or a significant life question. Allow an image or figure to form in your mind's eye. Then engage with it, ask it questions, listen for its responses, and notice how it changes or develops. Afterward, record what happened through writing, drawing, or movement. This practice builds a conscious relationship with your unconscious, allowing its wisdom to guide your waking life. Through active imagination, you can access guidance that's specifically tailored to your unique situation, rather than relying solely on external authorities. You develop what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between opposites until a third, previously unimagined possibility emerges. This capacity is especially valuable in our complex world, where simplistic, either-or thinking fails to address our multidimensional challenges. Another crucial aspect of Jung's legacy is his understanding of the religious function of the psyche. Jung observed that humans have an innate need for meaning and connection to something greater than themselves. When this need isn't consciously acknowledged and integrated, it doesn't disappear. It gets projected onto external ideologies, leaders, or material pursuits, often with destructive consequences. The decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not? Jung wrote, "That is the telling question of his life. By reconnecting with the symbolic and archetypal dimensions of experience, you satisfy this need for the sacred in a way that's psychologically integrated rather than literally concrete. You discover the divine not as something external and remote, but as a living reality expressing itself through your unique life journey." This brings us to one of Jung's most controversial yet profound concepts, the God image in the human psyche. Jung distinguished between God as an absolute reality, which he considered beyond human comprehension, and the God image, the way the divine reality is experienced and conceptualized within the human psyche. He suggested that our God images evolve as our consciousness evolves, and that psychological development is inseparable from spiritual development. The unconscious mind of man sees correctly even when conscious reason is blind and impotent, Jung noted near the end of his life. This insight suggests that our deepest intuitions and symbolic experiences may contain profound truths that our rational minds haven't yet grasped. By honoring these depths within yourself, you open to dimensions of reality that extend beyond the material world and conventional understanding. This doesn't mean abandoning reason. Jung himself was a rigorous scientist who valued empirical observation. Rather, it means expanding your definition of what's real to include the subjective interior dimensions of experience that can't be measured or quantified but are nonetheless essential to human flourishing. Jung called this expanded approach symbolic life, and he believed it was the antidote to the spiritual malaise affecting modern society. Consider how many people today suffer from what might be called meaning deficit disorder, a sense of emptiness and purposelessness despite material comfort and security. Jung would suggest that this suffering stems from our collective neglect of the symbolic dimension of life, our failure to engage with the deeper patterns and purposes that give our individual experiences their context and significance. How might your life change if you approached each day not just as a series of practical tasks and obligations, but as a meaningful chapter in your soul's journey? What if you viewed your challenges not just as problems to solve, but as initiations designed to awaken specific qualities within you? This shift in perspective, from literal to symbolic, doesn't change your external circumstances, but it transforms your relationship to them completely. One practice that Jung recommended for cultivating this symbolic perspective is paying attention to the archetypes active in your life. Archetypes are universal patterns that manifest in personified forms: the mother, the father, the hero, the trickster, the wise elder, the child, the lover, and many others. These aren't just characters in stories, they're living energies that move through your psyche, influencing how you perceive and respond to life events. At different phases of your journey, different archetypes become prominent. You might be in a hero phase, facing challenges that require courage and perseverance, or you might be experiencing the orphan archetype, dealing with abandonment and learning self-reliance. You might be called to embody the caregiver, nurturing others and creating safety, or you might be in the grip of the destroyer, releasing what no longer serves your evolution. By recognizing which archetypal energies are currently active in your life, you gain perspective on your experiences. You realize that what you're going through isn't random or meaningless, but part of an ancient human pattern, This recognition connects you to the millions of others who have walked similar paths throughout history, as reflected in myths, fairy tales, and religious narratives from around the world. Try this reflection. Which archetypal energy feels most active in your life right now? Are you primarily in a hero journey, facing challenges and developing strength? Are you in a seeker phase, searching for deeper truth and meaning? Are you embodying the creator, bringing new ideas or projects into form? Or perhaps the lover, deepening your capacity for intimacy and connection? Recognizing the archetypal dimension of your current experience helps you understand its purpose and navigate its challenges with greater wisdom. This brings us to another critical aspect of Jung's later teaching, the integration of opposites. Jung recognized that psychological health depends on our ability to reconcile seemingly contradictory aspects of our nature. The conscious mind tends to organize experience into binary oppositions: good, bad, strong, weak, masculine, feminine, spiritual, material. But the unconscious operates according to a different logic, where opposites coexist and complement each other. The greater the tension, the greater the potential, Jung wrote. Great energy only comes from a correspondingly great tension of opposites. Rather than trying to eliminate one side of a polarity in favor of the other, Jung encouraged developing the capacity to hold both simultaneously. This creates a dynamic tension from which new, more integrated possibilities can emerge. Consider how this principle might apply to your life. Perhaps you struggle with being both independent and connected in relationships. Or maybe you find it difficult to be both vulnerable and strong, structured and spontaneous, ambitious and content. These aren't either-or choices, but complementary qualities that, when integrated, create a richer, more authentic way of being. Jung observed that many psychological problems stem from identification with only one side of these natural polarities. A person who identifies solely with their rational side while rejecting their intuitive knowing creates an inner split that manifests as psychological symptoms. Similarly, someone who embraces only their spiritual aspirations while denying their physical needs creates an unsustainable imbalance that eventually demands correction. The path to wholeness, then, involves not eliminating these tensions, but developing the capacity to hold them consciously. This is what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's innate drive toward higher integration. Through dreams, active imagination, and creative expression, the unconscious mind naturally seeks to balance one-sided conscious attitudes and bring neglected aspects of the self into awareness. This brings us to a profound insight from Jung's final years, the relationship between personal transformation and collective evolution. As far as we can discern, he wrote, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. This kindling isn't just for individual enlightenment, but serves the evolution of consciousness itself. Jung proposed that each individual who undertakes the journey of conscious development contributes to a shift in the collective unconscious. As you integrate your shadow, reconcile inner opposites, and live in alignment with your authentic nature, you're not just healing yourself, you're participating in the healing of our shared human condition. This gives your personal struggles a meaning and significance beyond your individual life. Consider how the most transformative figures in human history, from Buddha and Jesus to Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., were individuals who integrated aspects of themselves that others projected outward. They recognized that the qualities they sought to develop in the world needed to be embodied within themselves first. Their external work was inseparable from their internal work. This doesn't mean you need to become a world-renowned leader to make a difference. Jung emphasized that even seemingly small acts of consciousness have ripple effects far beyond what we can perceive. When you choose awareness over reactivity, compassion over judgment, or authenticity over conformity, you're contributing to a field of consciousness that influences countless others, often in ways you'll never know. This brings us to one of Jung's most remarkable concepts, the unus mundus, or unified world. In his later writings, Jung proposed that beneath the apparent separation between psyche and matter, subject and object, inner and outer, there exists a unitary reality in which all distinctions dissolve. This unitary reality isn't accessible to ordinary consciousness, which depends on these distinctions, but it occasionally breaks through in experiences of synchronicity, deep meditation, or profound creative flow. The implications of this concept are revolutionary. It suggests that the boundary between what we consider inside us and outside us is more permeable than we realize. Your inner work affects the outer world, not just through your actions, but through the field of consciousness itself. Similarly, external events aren't just happening to you but are participating in your psychological unfolding in meaningful ways. This perspective transforms how you might view your life challenges. What if that difficult person or situation isn't just an obstacle to overcome, but a manifestation of something seeking integration within your own psyche? What if the qualities you most admire or despise in others are reflections of potentials within yourself waiting to be recognized? This doesn't mean you're causing every event in your life, but it does suggest a more intimate and reciprocal relationship between inner and outer realities than our conventional thinking allows. Jung's concept of the unius mundus anticipated discoveries in quantum physics, suggesting that observer and observed are inseparably intertwined. It also resonates with ancient wisdom traditions that speak of the fundamental unity underlying apparent diversity. What makes Jung's contribution unique is that he approached this unity not as an abstract philosophical concept, but as a living, psychological reality that manifests in dreams, symptoms, and synchronicities, the everyday evidence of our connection to something vaster than our individual selves. This brings us to a crucial insight from Jung's final years. The concept of the self is distinct from the ego. In everyday language, we often use these terms interchangeably, but Jung made a vital distinction between them. The ego is your conscious identity, your name, roles, beliefs, and the story you tell about who you are. The self, with a capital S, is the organizing center of the entire psyche, including both conscious and unconscious dimensions. It's the archetype of wholeness and the regulating center of your psychological life. The ego develops in the first half of life as you establish your identity in the world. This is necessary and appropriate. You need a stable sense of who you are to function effectively. But at some point, usually in midlife, many people begin to sense the limitations of their ego identity. They ask deeper questions. Is this all there is? What is my true purpose? What gives my life meaning beyond achievement and acquisition? These questions signal what Jung called the second half of life, not chronologically but psychologically, when the focus shifts from ego development to self-realization. This shift often begins with a crisis or breakdown of some kind, what Jung termed the night sea journey. A relationship ends, a career falters, health issues arise, or you simply wake up one day feeling that something essential is missing from your life despite external success. These disruptions, painful as they may be, are often the self's way of redirecting your attention toward wholeness when your ego has become too rigid or one-sided. Jung observed that many people resist this call, doubling down on familiar patterns even when they no longer bring satisfaction. They might change partners but repeat the same relationship dynamics, switch careers but maintain the same unhealthy work habits, or adopt new belief systems that replicate old psychological structures. These strategies might provide temporary relief but ultimately fail because they address symptoms rather than the underlying call to transformation. The chosen ones, in Jung's understanding, are those who respond to this call by turning inward rather than seeking external solutions. They begin to pay attention to their dreams, explore their creative impulses, question their assumptions, and develop a relationship with the unconscious aspects of themselves. This inward turn isn't narcissistic or escapist. It's the necessary foundation for authentic engagement with life's second half. Consider where you might be on this journey. Are you primarily focused on establishing your identity and place in the world? Or have you begun to question whether your current identity fully expresses who you are? Are you experiencing disruptions that seem to be calling you toward something deeper? There's no right or wrong place to be. Each phase has its own purpose and value. The key is to recognize where you are and what your current phase requires of you. If you're hearing the call to this deeper journey, Jung would offer this guidance. Trust the process, even when it seems to be taking you away from what others value or understand. The path to wholeness isn't a straight line, but a spiral that often appears to lead backward before it moves forward in a new way. What looks like regression or failure from an ego perspective may be exactly what's needed for your soul's evolution. This brings us to another profound aspect of Jung's teaching, the healing power of the symbolic life. Jung observed that many psychological symptoms diminish when people engage with symbolic practices that connect them to deeper layers of the psyche. These practices might include dream work, art making, ritual, meditation, or immersion in nature. Anything that temporarily shifts awareness from literal, practical concerns to the rich, metaphorical dimension of experience. Modern man, Jung wrote, is sick because he is not whole. This unwholeness manifests as the epidemic of anxiety, depression, addiction, and meaninglessness that characterizes our time. The healing doesn't come from eliminating symptoms through willpower or medication alone, though these may be necessary supports. It comes from restoring connection to the symbolic dimension of life, the realm of meaning, purpose, and belonging, to something greater than yourself. Try this practice. Choose a challenge you're currently facing. Instead of approaching it only as a problem to solve, ask, what might this situation be initiating me into? What quality or capacity is trying to develop in me through this experience? What larger pattern or story might my current struggle be part of? This shift from literal to symbolic perspective doesn't change your circumstances, but it transforms your relationship to them by revealing their potential meaning and purpose. Jung emphasized that this symbolic approach isn't about escaping reality, but about perceiving its deeper dimensions. Just as a poem contains more meaning than its literal words, your life contains more significance than its external events. Learning to read your experience symbolically allows you to participate consciously in your own unfolding, rather than feeling like a victim of random circumstances. This brings us to one of Jung's most challenging yet liberating concepts, the integration of the shadow. As mentioned earlier, the shadow contains qualities and impulses you've rejected or denied in yourself. These might include anger, selfishness, laziness, lust, greed, or any other traits deemed unacceptable by your family, culture, or conscious self-image. The shadow also contains positive qualities that were somehow threatening or inappropriate. In your particular developmental environment, your power, ambition, sensitivity, or brilliance. What makes shadow work so challenging is that, by definition, you're blind to your own shadow. You can see it clearly in others, those people who trigger strong reactions in you. But recognizing these same qualities in yourself requires extraordinary honesty and humility. It means acknowledging that you contain everything you judge. In others, though, perhaps in different forms or degrees. The reward for this courageous self-examination is freedom from projection, the unconscious attribution of your disowned qualities to others. When you reclaim your shadow, you stop making others responsible for carrying parts of yourself that you've rejected. This transforms your relationships from battlegrounds of projection to meetings between whole beings. It also prevents your shadow from sabotaging your conscious intentions, as unacknowledged aspects of yourself often do. A powerful practice for shadow work is to identify a person who strongly irritates or fascinates you, someone toward whom you feel a disproportionate reaction, whether negative or positive. List the specific qualities in this person that trigger your response. Then, with ruthless honesty, ask yourself, how might these qualities exist within me, perhaps in a different form? Where might I express similar traits in my life, even if I don't recognize them as such? This investigation often reveals shadow aspects that have been operating unconsciously in your life.